Who is Warren Redman?
That old question again, Darren.
Warren, can you share a little bit about your roots? A little bit of background, where you came from?
Oh, my roots. Okay. How long do we have? Let's go back to, none of you remember this, the Second World War, right? The first 5 years of my life was during World War II in England. So the result of that for me was actually tremendous, because we moved, before my memory, from inner city, East End of London, to the countryside. And I lived in a small cottage there were 4 generations of us, one of each. My great-grandfather, my grandmother, and my mother, and me. So my mother, her mother, and her father. So I had all the love I could imagine around me during that time. Yeah. At the end of the war, we moved back to, well, it wasn't back for me, but we moved to London, where the family had been, and it was noisy and dirty and smelly and lots of bombed out buildings, and it was not a happy time for a young 5-6-year-old. When I was 7, my great-grandfather died. He'd been my father figure, so I lost a tremendous figure in my life, and I was not really that aware of it at that time. I had a father, but you know, those first 5 years I hardly saw him, because he was in uniform and he was a soldier. 2 years later, I was just past my 9th birthday, my mother died. And a year later, my grandmother died. So there I was, 9 years old, having lost the 3 key loving adults in my life. My father couldn't cope with it, in that he could never talk about it. Never talk about any of them. Photographs disappeared and so on. So for me, that's what you did. You forgot about them. Except that I couldn't, of course. You certainly didn't talk about them. There were no images of them. I grew up for the next 35 years or so, holding in my heart the fact that that love, if it was ever there, would be taken away from me. And never having been listened to. When I started doing my own work, with a lot of wonderful teachers, and went into counselling and became a counsellor, and met the man who became my real mentor and teacher and great friend, Eugene Heimler, I discovered someone who would listen to me at a deep level, deep enough so that I could listen to myself. No advice giving, know what I should have been doing or shouldn't be doing with my life, but hearing at last my own 7-year-old, and more importantly really, my 5-year-old really happy child inside, because that was the essence of my nature, and it had been really shattered and lost. It was through that I embarked on my journey, and recognized that people above all else need to be really listened to at deep levels. And I developed a whole series of tools that are all aimed at that, and eventually called it emotional fitness. Or rather, other people called it that for me. I remember in one class that I was giving, and someone said, what we're doing here is emotional fitness, isn't it? And there are 9 steps, aren't there? And I just had to agree with them. So that's a tiny little bit of my roots, if you like, Darren. Thanks for asking.
Awesome.
Who am I?
Who am I?
I'll ask you next time we meet, all right?
Awesome.
Okay.